What would make a billionaire lose his cool? Not a business deal gone wrong, not a lawsuit, but a small joke from a waitress about the watch on his wrist. Strange, right? People like that seem untouchable. They live in glass towers, fly on private jets, and walk through life as if nothing can shake them. But one night in Newark, New Jersey, inside a quiet diner, a single sentence was enough to turn a powerful man pale. It wasn't just a joke, and it wasn't just the watch. It was the story hidden inside that watch, a story that had been buried for over 50 years. By the end of this story, you'll see how a simple laugh uncovered family secrets, betrayal, and a stolen inheritance. You'll understand why a dynasty almost collapsed, all because of a waitress, a joke, and a golden watch. And let me make something clear. This isn't a fairy tale. It isn't an exaggeration. This really happened. Sometimes the truth doesn't come out through big events. Sometimes it sneaks out through the smallest cracks, like one young woman's laugh on a rainy night. Picture this. Outside, rain slapped against the windows, turning neon lights into blurry streaks on the street. Inside Lou's diner, the air smelled like burnt coffee and bleach. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the same old country song played on the jukebox in the corner. It was almost midnight. The booths were half empty. A few truck drivers sipped coffee. A pair of college kids shared fries, their eyes heavy with sleep. Then the door opened. He walked in, a man who didn't belong there. His suit was dark and perfectly cut. His shoes shined against the greasy floor. He carried himself like someone who had never eaten in a place where you could get pancakes for $4.99. The waitress on duty, Eliza Carter, noticed him right away. She was 24, working 2 jobs, saving every dollar she could for nursing school. She was tired, but she still smiled as she poured coffee into his cup. That's when she saw his watch. It wasn't flashy, not covered in diamonds, but heavy and golden. Old, different from the cheap ones she usually saw on late-night customers. Trying to lighten the mood, she made a joke. "Careful with that thing," she said with a little laugh. "Looks like it's older than my grandma." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the man froze. His spoon rattled against the cup. The color drained from his face, as if she had said something terrible. Eliza blinked, confused. It was only a joke, but what she didn't know, what nobody in that diner could have guessed, was that her words had touched the deepest wound in that man's family, and pulling on that wound would unravel everything. Eliza Carter was 24 and tired. Not the kind of tired a nap could fix, but the heavy kind that came from working 2 jobs and chasing a dream that always seemed out of reach. By day, she folded clothes at a department store in downtown Newark. By night, she worked the late shift at Lou's diner, pouring coffee and clearing plates until her feet ached. She told herself it was temporary. She was saving for nursing school. She wanted more than tips and minimum wage. She wanted a future that didn't feel like running in circles. But on nights like this, when the clock ticked slowly toward midnight, even that dream felt far away. The diner was almost empty. A couple of truck drivers sat at the counter, their voices low and rough. A young couple argued softly in the corner booth, pushing fries back and forth between them. The smell of coffee and fried bacon hung in the air, mixed with the sharp scent of cleaning bleach. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a tired yellow glow. Eliza stood behind the counter, tying her hair back with an old elastic. She checked the clock. 30 more minutes until closing. That's when the door opened. She looked up and froze. A man stepped inside, and at once, the whole place felt different. He didn't look like anyone who usually came into Lou's. He wore a dark navy suit, sharp lines that fit him perfectly, like it had been made just for him. His shoes gleamed, black leather shining under the weak diner lights. His hair was neatly combed, his face calm, but his eyes carried weight, as if he was somewhere else entirely. He looked like he belonged in a Manhattan boardroom, not in a corner diner off a rain-slicked Newark street. The truck drivers noticed him too. One raised an eyebrow, muttering something under his breath. The arguing couple went silent for a moment, stealing a glance. Everyone could tell he didn't fit here. Eliza pulled herself together and grabbed a menu. "Evening," she said, with a polite smile. "Table for one?" The man gave a slight nod and slid into a booth by the window. Raindrops trickled down the glass behind him, catching bits of neon light from the liquor store across the street. Eliza walked over with the menu, her steps soft on the tiled floor. She set it down in front of him. "Can I get you started with coffee?" "Yes, please," he said quietly. His voice was deep but distant, like he was already lost in thought. She returned with the steaming cup and set it gently on the table. That's when she noticed his watch. It wasn't flashy like the watches rappers bragged about on TV. No diamonds, no loud design. But it was heavy, golden, and old. Its face slightly worn. The strap solid and expensive. It looked like something with history, something passed down. Eliza, trying to lighten the mood, let out a small laugh. "Careful with that thing," she joked. "Looks like it's older than my grandma." It was just a joke, but the moment the words left her lips, everything changed. The man froze. His hand, holding the spoon, stopped midair. The spoon clinked softly against the porcelain cup. His eyes widened just slightly, but enough for Eliza to notice. The color drained from his face. For a moment, it looked as though the life had been pulled out of him. Eliza's smile faltered. I didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly, worried she had offended him. But the man didn't answer. He just stared at the watch, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. A silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable, as if her words had opened a door she wasn't supposed to touch. Finally, he set the spoon down carefully, almost too carefully, like his hands were trembling. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and placed it on the table. "For the coffee," he said softly. His voice sounded heavier now, edged with something Eliza couldn't name. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. His steps were calm, but his shoulders were tense. He didn't look back. The door swung open, letting in the sound of rain and the smell of wet asphalt. A gust of cold air swept through before the door closed behind him. Eliza blinked, staring at the booth where he had sat for less than 5 minutes. $100 for a cup of coffee? Her eyes dropped to the bill, then to the cup, half full and still steaming. Something about the whole thing didn't sit right. Why had a simple joke about a watch left him so shaken? Why pay so much for so little? And why leave without a word? She didn't know it yet, but that short encounter was the first pull of a thread that would unravel everything. Her past, her grandmother's secrets, and a dynasty built on lies. And it had all started with a laugh she thought meant nothing. Eliza was still staring at the empty booth when she noticed it. At first, she thought the man had only left behind the $100 bill. But when she cleared the table, she found a folded napkin, neatly placed under the edge of the coffee cup. Her fingers hesitated before picking it up. It wasn't stained. It wasn't scribbled with a phone number like the notes she sometimes found from lonely truckers. This was different. The handwriting was sharp, steady, and deliberate, written in dark ink. She unfolded it, her eyes narrowing as she read the words. "Do you know Eleanor?" That was all it said, nothing else. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, gripping the napkin tighter. For a long moment, the diner noise faded. The buzzing lights, the clinking dishes, the quiet voices of the truckers. All she could hear was the sudden rush of her own heartbeat. Eleanor, that name didn't belong to strangers. That name belonged to her grandmother. Eliza whispered it under her breath, as if saying it aloud would make sense of the impossible. Eleanor. Her stomach turned. How would a man like that, a billionaire-looking stranger in a perfect suit, know Eleanor? The napkin trembled in her hand. Shock came first. She felt a chill climb her spine, her chest tightening. Then confusion rushed in. Maybe it wasn't the same Eleanor. Maybe he meant someone else. But no. How many Eleanors could there be connected to her? She had only ever known one. And then came unease, heavy and cold. She sat down at the booth, her legs suddenly weak. The $100 bill stared back at her, crisp and silent. The cup of coffee still steamed faintly, as if mocking her. Nothing about this made sense. Her grandmother, Eleanor Carter, had raised her since she was 3. Her earliest memories weren't of her parents. They were of Eleanor's tiny house on the corner of Maple Avenue. Eleanor's voice singing hymns while she cooked. Eleanor's steady hands braiding her hair before school. Eleanor's quiet strength that held everything together, even when money was tight. But there had always been shadows in the story. Eliza didn't remember her mother. Not really. She had only a blurred memory of a woman's perfume, a laugh in the distance, then nothing. Whenever she asked Eleanor about it, her grandmother would grow quiet. Some questions don't have answers yet, she'd say, her eyes far away. And her father? There was no story at all. Eleanor never mentioned him. It was as though he didn't exist. So, Eliza had grown up carrying a box of unanswered questions she eventually stopped opening. Life was simple that way. Until tonight. Now, out of nowhere, a stranger in a suit and an old watch had written her grandmother's name on a napkin and walked out pale-faced, like he had seen a ghost. Why? Her hands pressed the napkin flat against the table. She read the words again, slower this time, as though they might change if she looked hard enough. Do you know Eleanor? It wasn't a question. It was a message. A door cracking open. Memories pushed in like waves. She remembered Eleanor telling her bedtime stories about courage and honesty, always hinting that there were truths hidden just beyond Eliza's reach. She remembered Eleanor warning her gently once when she was 13. One day, people may come asking questions. Don't be quick to trust them. At the time, Eliza thought it was just grandmotherly caution. But what if it had been more? What if this night in a half-empty Newark diner, was the moment Eleanor had warned her about? Her throat tightened. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket, glancing around to make sure no one had seen. The truck drivers were gone now, the young couple had slipped out, and the diner was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Eliza cleaned up quickly, but her mind wasn't in it. Every movement felt automatic. Stack plates, wipe table, sweep crumbs. But behind it all was the question burning in her chest. Why does a billionaire know Eleanor's name? She locked the diner doors at closing, stepping out into the rain-slick street. The air was cold, damp against her skin. She pulled her jacket tighter and started the walk home. Her neighborhood wasn't far, but the shadows felt longer tonight. The question in her pocket weighed more than her keys or phone ever had. The napkin seemed to pulse with secrets. Her thoughts spiraled. Was Eleanor hiding something? Had she lived a life Eliza knew nothing about? Could this man, this stranger, be connected to her missing parents? By the time she reached her small apartment, her head was spinning. She kicked off her shoes, sat on the edge of her bed, and pulled out the napkin again. The handwriting stared back at her, steady and confident. It wasn't a random note. It was intentional. A man like that didn't ask about Eleanor by accident. Eliza leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to call her grandmother right then, demand answers, but she hesitated. Eleanor was 76 now, living in that same old house, her health weaker with each passing year. If she pressed too hard, would she get the truth, or would Eleanor retreat further into silence? Her chest ached. For the first time in years, the missing pieces of her family history didn't feel like distant mysteries. They felt close, pressing against her life, threatening to break it open. She closed her eyes, gripping the napkin tight. Somewhere in the city, that man was walking under the same rain. Somewhere, he carried a story connected to hers. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The question had been planted, and until she had an answer, nothing in her life would feel the same. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She tossed on her narrow bed, the city noises drifting through her window, the distant honk of horns, the steady rhythm of rain dripping off the fire escape. But her mind stayed locked on that one napkin folded on the nightstand, its two words glowing in her memory like neon letters. Do you know Eleanor? By morning, her decision was made. She had to tell her grandmother. Eleanor Carter lived just a few blocks away, in the same brick house she had lived in for 40 years. The kind of house that smelled like baked bread and old wood, where every piece of furniture carried memory. When Eliza stepped inside, the air was warm with the smell of chamomile tea. Eleanor sat in her usual chair by the window, a quilt draped over her lap. Her hair, silver and thin now, was pulled back neatly, and her sharp blue eyes softened when she saw her granddaughter. "You're here early, sweetheart," Eleanor said, smiling faintly. "Rough night at the diner?" Eliza forced a laugh as she dropped her bag by the door. "You could say that." She poured herself into the chair opposite her grandmother, her hands twisting together. For a moment, she wasn't sure how to start. How do you tell someone that a stranger with $1,000 suit and a ghostly stare had written down their name as if it were a password. Finally, she just blurted it out. "Grandma, does the name Gideon Hale mean anything to you?" Eleanor's smile faded. A shadow crossed her face, but she shook her head. "No. Why do you ask?" Eliza leaned forward. "He came into the diner last night. He looked different. Expensive suit, quiet, but heavy, like he carried something. And he asked about you." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "About me?" Eliza nodded. He wrote it down, on a napkin. "Do you know Eleanor?" That's all it said. The room went still. Eleanor's hands, steady for most of Eliza's life, tightened around the edge of her quilt. But Eliza pressed on, lowering her voice. "There's something else. He was wearing a watch. Not flashy. Old gold, heavy. I made a stupid joke about it. Said it looked older than my grandma." She paused, watching Eleanor's face. At first, her grandmother just stared at her. Then, slowly, her hands began to tremble. The quilt slipped from her lap. Her voice came out in a whisper, shaky and thin. "That watch, it was supposed to be buried with him." Eliza froze. The air seemed to leave the room, replaced by a cold weight pressing on her chest. "What do you mean? Buried with who?" But Eleanor didn't answer. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes suddenly wet, her lips pressed tightly together as if sealing in words she couldn't allow out. Eliza's pulse raced. She had never seen her grandmother like this. So fragile, so shaken. Eleanor Carter had always been her anchor, steady no matter the storm. But now, for the first time, she looked small, breakable, afraid. "Grandma, please," Eliza whispered. "Tell me what's going on." Eleanor shook her head, the tears spilling now. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, her voice firm despite the tremor. "Some graves are better left unopened, Eliza. Some truths do more harm than good. But this man, he knew your name. He left me that note." Eliza pressed. "You can't just pretend it doesn't matter." Eleanor closed her eyes, her breathing uneven. "I warned you once years ago. People may come asking questions. And when they do, you must be careful. Promise me you'll be careful." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "You knew this would happen?" "I prayed it wouldn't," Eleanor whispered. "But if he has that watch, then the past isn't finished with us." Eliza sat back stunned. Her grandmother's words felt like riddles, half-truths dripping with danger, but offering no clarity. The watch, buried with him, the past not finished. None of it made sense, but one thing was clear. Eleanor wasn't going to explain. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Finally, Eleanor reached for her granddaughter's hand. Her grip was weak, but desperate. "Eliza, listen to me. Whatever you do, don't dig into this. Promise me you'll let it go." Eliza swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She wanted to promise. She wanted to let it slide away, like so many other unanswered questions in her life. But she couldn't. Not this time. "Grandma," she said softly, "I can't promise that." Eleanor's eyes searched hers, sadness filling them. She looked as though she wanted to say more, to spill everything she had locked away for decades. But instead, she just sighed and turned her gaze back to the window, watching the gray clouds roll in. Eliza sat there for a long time, her grandmother's words echoing in her chest. Buried with him. Who was him? And why did the watch of all things make Eleanor tremble like she'd seen a ghost? As the morning stretched on, Eliza knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of her questions. It was only the start. If her grandmother wouldn't give her the truth, she would find it herself. No matter what, secrets had to be uncovered. She looked once more at Eleanor, fragile, silent, staring out at the cloudy sky, and made a quiet vow inside her heart. Whatever the watch meant, whatever connected to, she would uncover it, even if it changed everything. The diner was quiet again. Midnight hours always stretched long at Lou's half-empty booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked in years, the buzz of fluorescent lights filling in the silence. Eliza was refilling salt shakers when the bell above the door jingled. She glanced up and froze. It was him, the man from before, the one with the perfect suit, the heavy watch, and the pale reaction that still haunted her. Gideon Hale. He looked the same as last time, but tonight he carried something heavier. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set like stone. When his eyes met hers, Eliza's stomach tightened. He slid into the same booth. No menu, no words. Just sat there waiting. Eliza grabbed a coffee pot, though her hands felt unsteady. She walked over, forcing her voice into something steady. Back again. He gave the faintest nod. Black coffee. His voice was low-clipped. She poured, watching the dark liquid swirl into the cup. She wanted to say something casual, but her tongue felt heavy. Finally, she whispered, "You left me a note." His eyes flicked up, sharp and unreadable. "And did you answer it?" Her throat tightened. "Eleanor is my grandmother." For the first time, something cracked in his expression. Surprise, then a flash of something else. Pain? Regret? It passed quickly, hidden behind the mask of a man used to guarding every thought. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hand on the table. The gold watch glinted under the diner lights. Eliza's eyes locked on it, her grandmother's whisper echoing in her mind. That watch was supposed to be buried with him. That watch, she blurted before she could stop herself. It belonged to someone who should be dead. Gideon's jaw tightened. He glanced at the watch, then back at her. For a long moment he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was quieter, as though confessing a secret. "It was my grandfather's," he said. Eliza blinked. "Your grandfather?" He nodded slowly. "Arthur Hale. He built the Hale dynasty, real estate, shipping, power deals that shaped half of New Jersey back in the 60s. People say he was unstoppable. But then one night he disappeared. No body, no answers. Just gone." Eliza gripped the edge of the booth, her grandmother's trembling hands. The word buried. And now a disappearance? "What happened to him?" she asked softly. Gideon's eyes darkened. "That's the question no one has ever answered. The police called it an unsolved case. Newspapers whispered about mafia ties. Others said he'd made enemies in politics. But in my family, the rumors were worse. An affair that nearly tore us apart, betrayal from within, money stolen and hidden. Everyone wanted a piece of the dynasty. And Arthur Hale vanished in the middle of it all." He took a sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. For all his perfect suit and billionaire aura, Gideon looked human in that moment, haunted. Eliza's pulse raced. And the watch. His eyes flicked to her again. It was the only thing left behind. Or so we thought. My grandmother insisted it was buried with him. Yet here it is. He tapped the band lightly against the table. "And you noticed it." He joked about it, like you'd seen it before. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen it before, not until that night. But her grandmother's reaction said otherwise. Eleanor had seen it, and it terrified her. Eliza shook her head slowly. "I don't understand why you're asking about my grandmother." Gideon leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because the last person seen with Arthur Hale before he disappeared was a woman. A woman no one in my family ever identified. And when I said your grandmother's name, I saw the truth in your face." Eliza's mouth went dry. Her grandmother, the watch, the whispers of betrayal. "Are you saying," she struggled to form the words, "that Eleanor knew your grandfather?" Gideon didn't blink. "I'm saying Eleanor Carter may know what happened to him. And if she does, then she's tied to the downfall of my family, to everything we lost." His words cut sharp, leaving the air between them heavy. Eliza shook her head again, but her heart hammered. "That's impossible. My grandmother isn't." "Isn't what?" he interrupted. "The kind of woman who could change history? The kind of woman who could shatter a dynasty?" The intensity in his eyes made her look away. She didn't want to believe it, but deep down, the unease in Eleanor's trembling hands told her there was truth hiding in the shadows. Gideon leaned back, finally, his mask slipping back into place. "I don't know what role she played, but I do know this," he pointed at her gently, his voice steady. "You, Eliza Carter, you are part of the story now, whether you want to be or not." The diner felt suddenly smaller, the buzzing lights louder. Eliza's breath came shallow, her world tilting under the weight of secrets she hadn't asked for. She wanted to shout that he was wrong, that she had nothing to do with this cursed dynasty. But deep down, something told her the opposite. Because Gideon Hale wasn't just a billionaire looking for answers. He was a man haunted by his family's ghosts. And somehow, those ghosts were reaching straight into her life. She looked at the watch once more, the gold catching the light, as if mocking her. And, in her heart, one thought crystallized with sharp certainty. Her grandmother had secrets, and Gideon believed those secrets were tied to everything his family had lost. And now, whether she liked it or not, Eliza was caught in the middle of a storm that had begun long before she was born. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in her small apartment above the laundromat, staring at the ceiling while the hum of dryers below shook the floor. Gideon's words echoed in her mind. Your grandmother may know what happened to Arthur Hale. By morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat, stuffed her hair into a messy bun, and drove across town to the little brick house where Eleanor lived. The porch creaked as she stepped up. She knocked softly. Eleanor, silver-haired and frail but sharp-eyed, opened the door. Eliza? It's early. What's wrong? Eliza forced a smile, though her chest ached with nerves. Grandma, we need to talk. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books. A teapot hissed on the stove, and Eleanor's favorite quilt was folded neatly on the couch. Everything felt safe, too safe, compared to the storm raging in Eliza's mind. They sat at the table. Eleanor poured tea, her hands steady at first. But Eliza noticed the tremor in her fingers when she set the cup down. Eliza took a breath. Grandma, the man from the diner came back. Eleanor's hand froze. The man with the watch? Yes. His name is Gideon Hale. Eliza's voice shook. He said the watch belonged to his grandfather, Arthur Hale. For a moment, silence. Only the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then Eleanor closed her eyes, her shoulders sinking as if the name carried a weight too heavy to bear. Eliza, she whispered, some doors should never be opened. Eliza leaned forward, her hands gripping the table. I need to know, Grandma. Who was he? And why did you react like that when I described the watch? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She quickly brushed away. She stared down at her tea, as though the steam carried memories she had spent her life trying to forget. I knew him, she said finally. Her voice was soft, almost broken. Arthur Hale. I knew him better than anyone. Eliza's chest tightened. You knew him? Eleanor gave a hollow laugh. Knew him? I loved him. The words landed heavy in the room. Eliza sat back, stunned. You were with him? Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes distant. It was the 1960s. Newark was different then. The Hale family ruled half the city. Arthur, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't cold. He was warm, charming, full of ideas. He made me feel like I mattered. Her voice softened, almost dreamlike. We met at a charity gala. I was working as a co-check girl. He stopped to talk to me, of all people, while the mayor and senators were in the same room. He asked me my name. He smiled like I was the only one there. And from that night, we kept seeing each other. Eliza's mind spun. Her grandmother, young and in love with a billionaire tycoon? It sounded impossible, but the raw ache in Eleanor's voice was real. But Grandma, Eliza pressed, if you loved him, why did he disappear? Why all the secrecy? Eleanor's expression darkened. Because we weren't supposed to exist. He was married, Eliza. He had a wife, a family. And me? I was a nobody. To be with me meant risking everything. His fortune, his reputation, his dynasty. Her hands trembled now, gripping the teacup like it might shatter. We thought we could escape it. He promised me we would. But the Hale family, they don't forgive betrayal. They don't forgive weakness. And when they found out, her voice cracked. She stopped, staring down at the table. Eliza's pulse raced. When they found out what? Eleanor shook her head fiercely. No, I can't. Some truths bring nothing but pain. Leave it buried, Eliza. Please. But Eliza couldn't stop now. Grandma, you said that watch was supposed to be buried with him. With him. What happened to Arthur Hale? Did you see him the night he disappeared? Eleanor's lips pressed tight. Her eyes glistened, but she refused to answer. Instead, she whispered, some stories end in graves, and I don't want yours to be one of them. Eliza's throat burned. Her grandmother's pain was clear, but so was the secrecy. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, seeing the truth just beyond the fog, but being held back by the one person she trusted most. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, But Eleanor's trembling shoulders stopped her. Instead, she sat in silence, letting the weight of the unfinished confession sink in. Finally, Eleanor reached across the table, clutching Eliza's hand. Her voice was low, urgent. "Promise me, Eliza, don't go digging into the Hale family. They are powerful, dangerous. You don't know the kind of people you're dealing with." Eliza nodded weakly, but inside she knew the promise was already broken. She needed the truth. About Arthur Hale, about her grandmother, about why a billionaire heir thought she was tied to his family's downfall. As she left the house, the autumn wind bit at her face. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. Eliza wrapped her coat tighter and whispered to herself, "I will find out what happened, no matter what Grandma says." She didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. The next time Eliza saw Gideon Hale, it wasn't at Lou's diner. It was on a crisp Saturday morning when an unfamiliar black town car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver, dressed in a sharp suit, stepped out and tipped his cap. "Miss Carter?" he asked. Eliza hesitated on the stoop, clutching her tote bag like a shield. "Yes." The man handed her a sealed envelope, heavy paper, embossed with a silver crest she didn't recognize. Inside, a simple card. "Eliza, dinner tonight, Manhattan. No refusals. Gideon." No address, just a time. 7 o'clock. Her stomach nodded. Part of her screamed not to go. Another part, louder, restless, needed to know why he was pulling her deeper into this strange orbit. At 6:45 p.m., Eliza found herself in a cab crossing the Queensboro Bridge, the skyline of Manhattan rising like glass and steel teeth against the sunset. She wore her best dress, navy blue secondhand, pressed 3 times until it looked new. Her palms sweated against the clutch bag resting in her lap. The cab stopped at a gleaming tower of glass. The doorman checked her name before waving her inside. The elevator shot up so fast her ears popped. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The penthouse was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling gold light across marble floors. Abstract paintings hung on the walls. A grand piano gleamed in one corner. The city stretched endlessly below, traffic like rivers of red and white light. And there he was, Gideon Hale. He stood near the window in a charcoal suit, drink in hand. The city behind him like his personal kingdom. He didn't smile. "Eliza," he said, his voice smooth but taut. "You came." "I wasn't sure I had a choice," she replied, stepping cautiously inside. "Good instinct." He gestured toward the dining table set for 2, candles flickering. "Dinner first, questions later." They sat across from each other, silver cutlery glinting under the lights. Eliza had never tasted food like this. Tender filet mignon, wine poured from a bottle older than she was. But the richness only made her feel more out of place. "You don't belong in diners," Gideon said suddenly, watching her over the rim of his glass. Eliza blinked. "Excuse me. You belong in rooms like this. You carry yourself with dignity, intelligence, strength." His words were sharp, like assessments, not compliments. "But you're wasting it serving coffee to truck drivers and businessmen who barely remember your name." Eliza bristled. "I'm not ashamed of working at Lou's. It's honest." Gideon tilted his head. "Honest doesn't change the world." The silence that followed stretched, heavy and uneasy. Finally, Eliza set down her fork. "Why am I here, Gideon? Why drag me into your world? I don't belong to this, whatever this is." His gaze hardened, the mask slipping just enough for her to see the strain beneath. "You do belong, Eliza, whether you like it or not." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He leaned forward, his voice low. "The Hale dynasty didn't just vanish in the 1960s. My grandfather disappeared, yes, but so did his fortune, his alliances, his secrets. And now you show up, connected to Eleanor Carter, connected to the one woman people whispered about when everything began to crumble." Eliza's heart hammered. "My grandmother had nothing to do with." "Don't lie to me." Gideon's hand slammed against the table, rattling the silverware. His eyes burned with something raw. "I've spent my life trying to rebuild what was taken. My family's name, our legacy. And you are a thread in the very tapestry that unraveled it." His words cut deep. Eliza swallowed hard, torn between fear and defiance. "So what? You brought me here to interrogate me." "No," Gideon said, his voice softer now, almost weary. "I brought you here because I need to know if you're my enemy or my ally." The city lights flickered against the glass as silence fell again. Eliza stared at him, trying to read the man behind the polished suit. For the first time, she saw more than power. She saw torment, desperation, a man haunted by shadows he couldn't escape. And she realized this wasn't just about the past. This was about survival. Gideon leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Eliza, listen carefully. Some truths are more dangerous than lies. They don't just ruin reputations. They end lives. If you dig too deep into Arthur Hale, into what your grandmother was to him, you won't just find answers. You'll find graves." Her breath caught. "Are you threatening me?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm warning you. Some truths kill more than lies ever could." The words hung in the air, chilling, final. Eliza sat frozen, fork still in hand, as the city roared below them. She had never felt smaller or more certain that she couldn't walk away now. Because if Gideon Hale thought she was a threat, then the truth was closer than she ever imagined. Gideon's warning leaves Eliza with a choice: stay safe and silent, or risk everything to uncover the truth her grandmother won't speak. The words kept echoing in Eliza's mind. Some truths kill more than lies. She couldn't sleep after that night in the penthouse. The city noise outside her apartment window felt louder, harsher. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gideon's face across the candlelit table, calm, polished, but cracked just enough for her to glimpse the desperation underneath. The warning wasn't enough to stop her. If anything, it lit a fire inside her. She had to know what her grandmother was hiding. On her next day off from the diner, Eliza went to the Newark Public Library. The building smelled of dust and old paper, like secrets waiting to be touched. She sat at a microfilm machine, scrolling through newspapers from the 1960s. That's when she saw the first headline: "Real estate mogul Arthur Hale disappears. Family left in turmoil." The article painted Arthur Hale as a visionary businessman, a man whose empire stretched across New Jersey and Manhattan. But beneath the praise there were whispers, ties to unsavory figures, unexplained gaps in finances, rumors of affairs. The more she read, the more the picture shifted. Arthur Hale wasn't just a missing billionaire. He was a man living on the edge of something dangerous. One headline from 1965 chilled her: "Mob activity suspected in Hale disappearance." The article hinted at connections between Arthur and a Jersey crime family, the Mancusos. Allegedly, Arthur had borrowed money for a project that went bad. When he couldn't pay it back, he vanished. But the tone of the piece felt off, like it was written to steer suspicion away from something bigger. The words "unconfirmed sources" popped up too many times. Eliza scribbled notes, her pen racing across the page. Arthur Hale, Mancuso family, debt, missing body, missing files. The deeper she went, the stranger it became. Some newspapers repeated the same vague details word for word, almost as if they'd been fed a script. And then she hit a wall. At the city records office, Eliza requested the police file on Arthur Hale's disappearance. The clerk, a tired man with glasses slipping down his nose, tapped on a keyboard and frowned. "That case," he muttered. "Odd. No record in the system." "What do you mean, no record?" Eliza asked. "Just what I said. It should be here." But he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Some cases get pulled, especially old ones with powerful names attached." Eliza's stomach twisted. Someone had erased the official record of Arthur Hale's disappearance. But who? She left the office with her heart pounding. The city streets felt different now, as if eyes were on her from every corner. That evening, Eliza sat at her kitchen table surrounded by scribbled notes, photocopies, and highlighted articles. She traced lines between dates, names, events, trying to build a timeline. But each path seemed to break off into a dead end. That's when her phone buzzed. A text from Gideon. "You're chasing ghosts, Eliza." She froze, staring at the screen. How did he know? Was he following her? Watching her? Her fingers shook as she typed back. "How do you know where I've been?" No reply, just silence. Her throat went dry. Was Gideon helping her by pointing to what mattered? Or was he manipulating her, controlling the story so she never reached the real truth? That night, Eliza couldn't stop pacing. The notes on her table looked like a crime board from a detective show. Names in circles, arrows pointing to nothing. Arthur Hale, Mancuso family, inheritance. Eleanor, her grandmother's name sat in the middle of it all, circled 3 times. She remembered Eleanor's trembling hands, her whispered words about the watch. That watch was supposed to be buried with him. Buried with who? Arthur Hale? If that was true, then her grandmother knew more than she'd ever admitted. Eliza pressed her palms against her eyes, exhaustion pressing down. But the truth was pulling her in, winding tighter and tighter like a spiral she couldn't escape. Somewhere in the mix of mafia shadows, family lies, and missing police files was the answer. And Gideon Hale, whether ally or enemy, wasn't going to let her walk away. Eliza realizes she can't trust anyone. Not the newspapers, not the police, not even Gideon. But the only person left who might have answers is the one who refuses to speak. Eleanor. The small white envelope felt heavier than it should. Eliza sat in her car outside the lab, staring at it. Weeks of questions, sleepless nights, and whispered warnings, all leading to this. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside, the words were clear and cold, printed in black and white. Probability of relation, 99.7%. Her breath caught. The DNA test confirmed it. She was tied to the Hale bloodline. She laughed out loud, a shaky, almost disbelieving sound. After all the doubt, after all the pushback, she finally had proof. She wasn't crazy. Eleanor hadn't been spinning stories. The golden watch hadn't been a random relic. It was all connected. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. That evening, she drove to the diner early for her shift. Lou raised an eyebrow when he saw her bounce through the door with a grin instead of tired eyes. "You in the lottery or something?" he asked, flipping burgers on the grill. "Something like that," she said, sliding the envelope into her apron pocket. All night she carried that secret close, a private flame of victory. When the regulars complained about burnt toast or weak coffee, it didn't sting like before. She knew something bigger now, that she belonged to a dynasty worth billions, a name that carried weight far beyond Newark. Part of her wanted to run straight to Gideon with the proof, to slam the paper down on his polished table and demand answers. But another part of her wanted to savor it first, to tell Eleanor, to watch the relief wash over her grandmother's face. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone anymore. 2 nights later, Gideon appeared at Lou's diner again. He didn't order food. He didn't even sit. He just slid into the booth across from Eliza with the quiet confidence of someone who always got his way. "You look different," he said, studying her face. "I know," Eliza replied, pulling the envelope from her apron pocket, "because I finally know the truth." She pushed the DNA results across the table. Gideon's eyes scanned the page. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. "So it's real," Eliza pressed. "I'm family. I have the proof now. You can stop playing games." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Gideon leaned back, folding the paper neatly before setting it aside. "You think this is proof?" he said softly. Eliza's smile faltered. "It's science. What more do you need?" "Science can be bent," Gideon said, his voice calm but sharp. "Do you know how many labs I own? How many reports I've had rewritten for shareholders, for courts, for partners who needed clean paper?" Her stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Gideon replied, "that this isn't the whole story. Eleanor Carter has been crafting lies for decades. She's good at it. Too good. And she used you." Eliza shook her head. "No. She raised me. She protected me." "She trapped you," Gideon cut in. "She gave you just enough crumbs to keep you chasing. But if you really want to know the truth, if you want to know why that watch mattered, you need to understand something. My grandfather's disappearance nearly destroyed my family, and Eleanor Carter was at the center of it." The words landed like blows. Gideon reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder. He slid it across the table. Inside were yellowed photographs, grainy surveillance shots of Eleanor in the 1960s, standing beside Arthur Hale outside a hotel. Another photo showed Eleanor in a courtroom hallway, speaking with a Mancuso family associate. And then there was a letter, typed and signed, but stamped with the Hale family crest. The words leapt off the page. Payment must be delayed until the matter of Carter is resolved. Eliza's mouth went dry. You see, Gideon said quietly, your grandmother wasn't some innocent woman caught in a love story. She was leverage. She was the reason my grandfather vanished. Eliza closed the folder, her pulse racing. No, she wouldn't. Wouldn't she? Gideon's voice sharpened. She's had 50 years to polish her version. You've only heard her side. But the truth, Eliza, the truth is uglier. Eliza sat frozen, her mind spinning. The DNA results in her pocket said one thing. The folder in front of her said another. Had Eleanor lied all these years? Had she dragged Eliza into a story that wasn't hers to claim? Or was Gideon rewriting history to protect the Hale dynasty from a truth too damning to face? The diner suddenly felt too quiet. Every clink of dishes in the background magnified. She looked at Gideon. He looked back with steady, haunted eyes. 2 stories, 2 sets of evidence, both impossible to ignore. And for the first time, Eliza realized she couldn't tell which was real and which was a trap. The audience is left torn. Do they trust the grandmother's story or Gideon's evidence? The DNA points one way, the folder another. The truth hangs in limbo. The storm outside rattled the old Newark apartment windows like fists pounding for entry. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. Inside, Eleanor Carter sat hunched in her chair, the lamplight casting deep shadows across her wrinkled face. Eliza had rushed over after Gideon's visit, folder and DNA test, still burning in her bag like twin pieces of evidence from 2 different worlds. Her grandmother was knitting when she entered, but the needle slipped from her hands as soon as she saw Eliza's expression. Tell me the truth, Grandma, Eliza said, voice trembling. All of it. No more half answers. No more mysteries. What happened between you and Arthur Hale? Eleanor closed her eyes. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then, with a sigh that seemed to drain decades from her chest, she whispered, It's time. I was 19, Eleanor began, her voice both fragile and sharp, like glass about to crack. I worked at a hotel in Manhattan. I didn't know who he was at first. Arthur Hale. He wasn't just charming. He was kind in a way men of money rarely are. He saw me, Eliza. Not the maid's uniform. Not the girl carrying trays. He saw me. Her hands trembled as she reached for her tea. We kept it secret. For nearly 2 years. Nights stolen between business trips. Letters written in codes, so no one would know. And then the watch. She looked at Eliza, eyes glistening. He gave me that watch on my 20th birthday, said it had belonged to his father, and that passing it to me was his way of promising a future. He told me he would fight his family for us. Eleanor's voice broke, but he never got the chance. She stared at her lap, wringing her hands. Arthur's family found out. The Hales had plans for him, alliances, marriages, fortunes tied to names I didn't even understand. And me? I was nothing but a scandal that could unravel it all. One night, he promised he would come for me, no matter the cost. But instead, he disappeared. Eliza's heart pounded. The mafia rumors, the missing reports, Gideon said. Gideon doesn't know the half of it, Eleanor cut in, suddenly fierce. Arthur didn't run. He didn't betray me. He was taken. His own brothers arranged it. They staged the mafia story to cover their tracks. And when his body was found months later, buried deep in the Pine Barrens, they buried the truth with him. The Hales called it a disappearance because admitting the truth would have shattered their empire. Eliza's breath hitched. So they knew. All along, they knew. Eleanor nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. They killed their own blood to protect their fortune. And they stole the watch from me when I demanded answers. I thought it was gone forever. I never knew how it surfaced again until you told me. The room seemed to shrink around Eliza. She remembered Gideon's folder, the photographs, the letter accusing Eleanor. And yet here was her grandmother, broken and raw, admitting not just love, but a cover-up so monstrous it explained decades of silence. They blamed me, you know, Eleanor whispered. They painted me as the reason he vanished. A stain on their name. I was followed, threatened, silenced. When your mother was born, her voice cracked again. They wanted her gone too. That's why she disappeared, Eliza. She didn't leave you by choice. She was forced out to keep you safe from the Hale name. Eliza's throat tightened. You mean the mom's alive? Eleanor didn't answer directly. She only said, the Hales have a way of erasing what they can't control. The watch wasn't just jewelry, Eleanor continued, her eyes locked on Eliza's. It was Arthur's promise. It was proof that what we had was real, proof that he loved me. They tried to bury it with him, but somehow it found its way back into the world. And when you saw Gideon with it, it was as if Arthur himself had come knocking again. Eliza felt chills run through her. The object that had started everything, the joke, the diner, the pale billionaire, wasn't just an accessory. It was the last fragment of a love destroyed by power. So when Gideon looks at me, Eliza whispered, he's seeing all of this. Yes, Eleanor said, and he's deciding whether to face the truth or bury it, like his family always has. Eleanor leaned forward, gripping Eliza's hands with surprising strength. They will tell you I lied. They will show you papers, photographs, whispers. But those men, those families, they wrote history to suit themselves. Arthur loved me. He wanted you, wanted us. And they took him away. Don't let them take our truth too. Eliza sat frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She thought of Gideon's steady voice, warning her that Eleanor was a manipulator. She thought of the DNA results, the folder, the photographs. 2 versions of history, each complete, each devastating. But sitting there with her grandmother's trembling hands clutching hers, she couldn't shake the feeling that this raw confession, was closer to the truth than anything Gideon had offered. Still, the question burned. If the Hales had covered up Arthur's death, how far would they go now to keep the secret buried? Eliza rose from her chair, her heart pounding. She had the watch, she had the DNA, and now she had Eleanor's confession. 3 pieces of a puzzle pointing toward the same dark truth. But as she glanced toward the rain-smeared window, a shiver ran down her spine. Somewhere out there, Gideon was waiting, armed with his own version of the past, his own weapons of power and persuasion. And Eliza realized the real battle wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the future. Would she expose the dynasty's betrayal or become its next casualty? Eleanor's confession finally reveals Arthur Hale's love, the watch's proof, and the family's betrayal in covering up his death. But now Eliza must decide, trust Gideon, who wields evidence, or Eleanor, who offers lived truth. The Hale penthouse in Manhattan had always been a fortress, glass walls reflecting power, a skyline view that seemed to prove their untouchable place in the world. But on this night, the walls felt like mirrors closing in. Gideon stood in the center of the vast living room, the golden watch glinting faintly in his hand. Around him sat the Hale family elders, uncles, aunts, cousins draped in wealth like armor. Eliza stood just behind him, silent but steady, clutching Eleanor's written confession. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Gideon's uncle, Marcus Hale, leaned forward, his voice like gravel. What's the meaning of this, Gideon? Dragging strangers into our home. They're not strangers, Gideon said flatly. They're family, and it's time we admit what we've done to our own. He placed the watch on the glass table between them. The room seemed to recoil from it, as though the object itself carried a curse. This belonged to Arthur, Gideon continued. You told me he vanished, that he abandoned us. But the truth is, he was murdered by his own blood, and you covered it up to protect the fortune. The room erupted. Shouts, denials, faces flushed with anger. Some called him delusional. Others begged him to stop before it ruined them all. But Gideon pressed forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. I've seen the files. I've seen the payments to the Mancuso family. I've seen the letters tying Eleanor Carter to Arthur. And to the cover-up. You buried the truth for 60 years, but you won't bury it again. Eliza stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice clear. Arthur Hale didn't die nameless in the dark. He loved my grandmother. He gave her that watch. He wanted a life beyond your greed, and you destroyed it. The silence that followed was heavier than the shouting had been. Marcus's face turned pale. Another uncle lowered his eyes, shame cracking the mask of wealth. Gideon's mother, a stern woman who had spent her life protecting the dynasty, finally whispered, "If this comes out, we lose everything." Gideon's gaze hardened. Then maybe everything deserves to be lost. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Newspapers, television, online headlines. Hale dynasty exposed in cover-up of 1960s murder. Stock prices plummeted. Foundations pulled their donations. Politicians who once courted the Hale name issued public condemnations. The family's empire, built on glass and lies, was cracking under the weight of truth. For Gideon, the destruction wasn't victory. It was grief. His family's name was tainted, his inheritance poisoned. But as he looked at Eliza, standing firm beside him, he knew at least the silence had been broken. Arthur Hale's story was no longer hidden in shadows. The truth had finally stepped into the light, and with it, the dynasty collapsed. Justice arrives not with triumph, but with ruin. The truth is revealed, reputations destroyed, and Gideon faces the cost of honesty. The storm had passed, though its wreckage was everywhere. The Hale name was no longer carved in marble. It was etched in scandal. But for Eliza, the collapse wasn't her ruin. It was her release. She was back at Lou's diner, apron tied around her waist, coffee pot in hand. But something had changed. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. The booth still smelled of grease and old vinyl. Yet the girl who once dreamt quietly behind the counter no longer felt small. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a Carter, a granddaughter of Arthur Hale, and more importantly, a woman who had stood in the face of power and demanded truth. Customers noticed it too. The way she carried herself, shoulders straight, eyes clear. When one man left her a tip, she didn't see it as charity. She saw it as respect she had earned. At home, Eleanor sat in her favorite chair by the window, the autumn light soft against her aging face. For decades, she had carried a secret that poisoned her days and haunted her nights. Now, though the revelation had broken a dynasty, it had freed her heart. She smiled as Eliza tucked a blanket over her knees. "Arthur can finally rest," she whispered. "And so can I." As for Gideon, he no longer moved through penthouses or boardrooms with the untouchable confidence of a Hale. He had walked away from the family's rotting empire, choosing instead the harder road, rebuilding a life stripped of lies. Alone in a modest office overlooking a far humbler skyline, he stared at a blank page in a leather notebook. For the first time, he would write his own story, one built on honesty, not inheritance. The lesson lingered in the air like the last echo of a song. Money could crumble, reputations could rot, but dignity and truth endured. Families weren't whole because of fortunes passed down. They were whole when secrets no longer divided them. Eliza poured another cup of coffee at the diner, the rain tapping against the glass outside. She no longer chased wealth or recognition. She had found something far greater, the strength to stand tall in her own story. And that was worth more than any dynasty. This story began with a joke, a waitress teasing a stranger about a watch, and it ended with the truth dragging an empire into the light. What does that tell us? That even the smallest voice, the simplest word, can shake walls that look unbreakable. Eliza never planned to bring down a dynasty. She was just trying to survive, working late nights to save for nursing school. But fate has a strange way of working. It doesn't always ask permission. Sometimes it drops a secret in your lap and forces you to decide. Will you look away, or will you chase the truth? For Eliza, that truth was bigger than money, bigger than power. It was about dignity, about giving her grandmother peace, about finally putting to rest the ghost of Arthur Hale, the man the Hale family tried to erase. And for Gideon, it meant confronting a legacy built on lies. The billionaire who once sat frozen in a diner booth learned that wealth cannot bury the past forever. No matter how deep you hide it, truth claws its way back. So here's the question I'll leave with you. What would you have done if that watch landed in your hands? Would you have laughed off, tucked the mystery away, and gone back to pouring coffee? Or would you have done what Eliza did? Follow the thread, no matter how dangerous, until the whole story unraveled? Because maybe, just maybe, the power to change isn't in money or dynasties at all. Maybe it's in the courage to speak, even when your voice feels small. And perhaps that's the real takeaway. You don't need a fortune to shake the world. Sometimes all it takes is one question asked at the right time, one truth told with the right courage. If you found yourself drawn into this story, if you believe that hidden truths deserve to see the light, then join us here. This channel is where stories like this live, tales of ordinary people who find themselves standing at the edge of extraordinary secrets. Subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Because who knows? The next time it could be about a letter forgotten in an attic, a photo found in a shoebox, or a stranger who knows a name they shouldn't. And as you leave, remember this. Dynasties may crumble, but dignity lasts forever.